At a grand opera house in Budapest, Hitman Joe blends in with the crowd, posing as just another theatergoer. His target is in sight, closely guarded by his bodyguards. As soon as the performance starts, Joe discreetly makes his way upstairs. Moments later, one of the bodyguards spots a shoe sticking out from behind a curtain and goes to investigate, only to be ambushed by Joe, who swiftly takes him out with a knife, hiding the body behind the same curtain. Joe then silently moves down the corridor, taking out another bodyguard with a single gunshot. Finally, he reaches the balcony, where his target waits. Desperate, the man offers Joe 3 times the payment, but Joe, unfazed, shoots him in the head without hesitation. The woman with the target freezes in fear, and Joe calmly tells her to stay quiet. Panicking, she runs off. Just before leaving, Joe locks eyes with Mays, the star of the opera, performing on stage. As Joe tries to leave, a sudden headache hits him, making him feel dizzy. Meanwhile, another bodyguard downstairs notices the woman running and tries to contact his boss. When he gets no response, he rushes to investigate and discovers the bodies. Before he can react, security spots him with a gun and prepares to arrest him. In a desperate move, the bodyguard opens fire, killing one officer while another calls for backup. He retreats to the balcony, and when another officer comes after him, he shoots him through the door. Suddenly, the entire theater lights up, and the bodyguard makes a daring leap from the balcony, landing in the middle of the stage, causing chaos. The crowd panics, dancers and audience members scrambling to escape, while another officer fires from the balcony, hitting the bodyguard from afar. Amid the chaos, Mays tries to flee but is knocked to the ground by the panicking crowd. Her phone falls, and in the rush, her hand and feet are trampled. At that moment, Joe sees her, helps her up, and grabs her phone, leading her outside to safety. But once outside, Joe's headache returns. Seizing the opportunity, he disappears while Mays is distracted. Back home, Joe realizes he still has Mays's phone. After taking medicine and downing alcohol, he goes to bed. The next day, he visits a doctor who runs several tests and suspects Joe may be suffering from years of head trauma. The full results will take time, but the doctor advises Joe to consider retiring from his dangerous job. Later, Joe visits his handler and old friend, Zvi, who suggests Joe take a vacation and maybe even meet someone special. Despite his initial reluctance, Joe visits Mays at her dance studio to return her phone. She's grateful and gives him her number, even flirting a little. On his way out, Joe tosses the number into the trash but soon regrets it and retrieves it. That evening, he awkwardly texts Mays, and they agree to meet for dinner. Their date goes well, and over the next few days, Joe finds himself dividing time between missions in Europe and dating Mays, all while hiding his true identity. Their relationship deepens, and they begin spending nights together. But Joe's headaches only worsen, and the medicine becomes less effective. When the test results finally come in, the doctor has devastating news. Joe has a neurodegenerative brain disorder. With only 3 months left to live, Joe is in shock. Refusing any offers for therapy or palliative care, Joe returns home and frantically researches his illness online, watching videos of others losing control of their bodies, confirming the hopelessness of his situation. In a moment of despair, Joe contemplates suicide, but he stops himself, thinking of Mays. Instead, he opens a hidden safe, taking out all his money, and then gathers his weapons and throws them into the river. The next day, Joe visits his old friend Zvi with a shocking request. He wants to put a $2 million contract on his own head. Joe explains that he would have ended things himself, but his life insurance won't pay out in that case. He wants Mays to get the money after he's gone. However, Zvi refuses. He can't bring himself to put a hit on his best friend, no matter the price. Afterward, Joe goes to see Antoinette, a former assassin turned handler. Her bodyguard is Max, a notorious killer with a brutal reputation. Antoinette holds a personal grudge against Joe because he killed her father, who had once mentored him. Delighted by the opportunity for revenge, she agrees to put a hit on Joe. However, Joe asks for the contract to go live at midnight, as he still has unfinished business to attend to. Once Joe leaves, Antoinette checks the assassin app to select hitmen for the job. First, she contacts Lovedoll, who's finishing a contract in Switzerland. But when he sees the offer, he turns it down. $2 million isn't enough for him. Next, she reaches out to Goyang and his gang, who are in Prague, disguised as workers in a karaoke bar. In a swift, coordinated attack, they reveal themselves and eliminate their targets within seconds. Goyang is more than happy to accept the contract on Joe. Just to be sure, Antoinette also sends the offer to the Langos brothers, who are in the middle of a brutal execution, using their bikes to tear a man apart. Later that night, Joe meets Maze, unaware that Max is tailing them. Joe breaks up with Maze, and though heartbroken, she gives him one last kiss before leaving in tears. Joe returns home and starts drinking while recording a message for Maze, intending to tell her the whole truth after he's dead. But he accidentally sends the message before it's finished. While Maze listens to the shocking message, Joe gets an unexpected call from his doctor. In a twist, the doctor reveals that Joe's test results had been mixed up with someone else's. Joe is perfectly healthy and has a long life ahead of him. With just minutes left until midnight, Joe hurriedly prepares for the imminent attack. Goyang and his gang arrive, using cigarette smoke to detect the laser sensors at the entrance, skillfully dodging them as they advance. From his hiding spot, Joe tells them that the contract is cancelled, but Goyang mocks him, reminding Joe that once a contract is issued, it must be honored. One of the gang members tracks Joe's voice to the bathroom, where Joe waits. A fight breaks out, but despite the man's impressive martial arts skills, Joe overpowers him and sends him crashing through a glass wall. Then a woman armed with an axe slashes Joe's back, but Joe quickly throws her onto the shards of glass and drags her throat across the broken pieces to finish her off. The martial artist tries to attack again, but Joe counters, breaking his leg and throwing him through the wall. Another gang member armed with a sword steps up next, triggering a fierce battle. After a few exchanges, Joe manages to break the man's arm, disarming him, and finally kills him by smashing him into a column. The last gang member, wielding two large blades, charges at Joe. Though she manages to stab him in the shoulder, Joe keeps fighting. With a powerful punch, he knocks her hard, causing her to lose several teeth as she collapses. Joe faces off with the last one standing, Goyang, who throws a knife at Joe's leg, but Joe counters by killing him with a blade he pulled from his own shoulder. As a final farewell, Joe lights Goyang's cigarette before leaving the apartment. On his way out, Joe activates a trap, blowing up his home, which sends the body of the toothless woman flying through a window, landing on the gang's car and causing it to explode. On the street, Joe uses Goyang's phone to call Antoinette, telling her the contract is cancelled, but she can keep the money. Furious, Antoinette refuses to let it go, doubling the reward as she still seeks revenge for her father. Joe hears the roar of approaching bikes and takes refuge in an old building, where he's soon surrounded by the Langos brothers. Using their bikes to launch attacks, they manage to bring Joe down several times. But when Joe spots a pipe nearby, he waits for one brother to charge, then strikes him, knocking him off the bike and crushing his head to finish him off. The other brother speeds up in a rage, but Joe kicks the front wheel, sending him flying. With both brothers taken out, Joe steals a bike to make his escape. Meanwhile, Antoinette sends the mission to the best hitmen across Europe. Lovedoll, who was still enjoying the high life in Switzerland, finally accepts the contract now that the reward is 4 million. In Scotland, the Mackenzie brothers also jump on board, celebrating by smashing beer bottles over their heads. In a seedy club in England, the party girls, who pose as dancers, take out their clients with weapons hidden in their skimpy outfits. A man tries to fight back, but they make quick work of him. Over in Spain, a group of criminals preparing a drug deal is interrupted by Botus, who dances his way through the room, using the knives in his boots to eliminate everyone with skillful precision. Back in Budapest, Joe returns to Zvi, who patches up his wounds with glue. Zvi, being only a handler, doesn't have guns, but he offers Joe some leftover explosives from a previous job. Zvi's wife even volunteers to help, giving Joe a massage that includes cracking his neck, which miraculously cures his headaches and dizziness. As Lovedoll arrives in Budapest by train, Antoinette sends him all the intel on Joe, including Maze's location. She also sends her cousin Money to pick Lovedoll up. Money is annoying and not very bright, but Antoinette promised her uncle she would train him to be a hitman. When they confront Maze on her way out of her building, she immediately takes Money down with a kick, but Lovedoll knocks her out with a punch, kidnapping her. The next morning, Joe travels to an old castle in the countryside. Max quickly learns of Joe's location and alerts the other hitmen. But this is all part of the plan. Zvi had leaked the information deliberately. At the castle, Joe prepares his weapons, ready for the fight. The Mackenzie brothers are the first to arrive. Joe is ready as the Mackenzie brothers enter the castle. He throws a grenade to slow them down, then charges in to fight. Initially, Joe holds his own against one of the brothers, but when they team up, they overpower him, kicking him into a set of armor. Joe grabs a gauntlet from the armor and uses it to land heavier punches. Despite his strength, the brothers' teamwork keeps bringing Joe down. While they argue, Joe takes advantage and activates a trap. He pulls a rope, causing a chandelier to fall, trapping one brother who is then pushed onto a deer head, instantly impaling him. Joe rips off a piece of the antler and faces the remaining brother, exchanging blows before stabbing him to death. Just then, the party girls storm in, guns blazing. Joe uses the dead brother's body as a shield to retreat into another room. The girls throw a grenade, but Joe dodges and fires back using the brother's gun. Another grenade goes off, injuring him, but he keeps fighting. Low on ammo, Joe baits one of the girls, who accidentally steps on a trap, causing an explosion. Joe quickly grabs her body, arms her grenades, and throws her at the other girl, killing them both in a massive explosion. The blast sends Joe flying through a door, where Botus is waiting. Botus disarms Joe immediately and puts in his earbuds to fight with music guiding his moves. In an intense hand-to-hand battle, Botus matches Joe blow for blow. Joe disables Botus' earbuds and they switch to sword fighting. After a heated exchange, Joe disarms Botus, but Botus grabs a gun and fires. Joe hides behind a table and activates another trap, blowing Botus up, leaving only his boots behind. Meanwhile, Lovedoll arrives with his crew and immediately senses something is off, seeing the vehicles of the fallen hitmen. He instructs Money to watch over Maze while he investigates. Maze, ever resourceful, manipulates Money into letting her out of the car, then pretends to fall, knocking him out with a branch. Lovedoll calls Joe using Maze's phone, offering to let her go if Joe surrenders. But the call is cut short as Max arrives with a heavily armed team. Max's team enters the castle cautiously, avoiding traps. Joe is hidden in the shadows and sets off an explosive that wipes out half of Max's men. Joe sneaks in, kills a soldier, and takes his gun to finish off the rest, then escapes through the back door. Outside, Lovedoll is waiting in the garden and forces Joe to drop his gun. Before they can negotiate, Maze arrives, running over Lovedoll with Money's car and opening the door for Joe to escape. As they drive away, Joe finally confesses everything to Maze, the illness mix-up and his true job as an assassin. He assures her he only kills criminals and swears he's retiring for good. Maze is relieved and reveals that she's pregnant. Their happiness is short-lived as Maze suddenly passes out, and Joe discovers a bullet wound on her neck. He abandons the car and carries her to the nearest building, which happens to be a church. Thankfully, the wound is superficial, and Maze soon wakes up. Overwhelmed with relief, Joe proposes, and Maze agrees. Though skeptical, the priest agrees to marry them after hearing Joe's confession about his past. Despite being horrified, the priest offers Joe redemption if he promises to retire. The simple ceremony is interrupted when Lovedoll barges in and opens fire. Joe tackles Maze to protect her, but the priest gets shot. A grenade suddenly flies into the church, providing enough smoke for Joe, Maze, and the priest to escape. The explosive was thrown by Max, who starts arguing with Lovedoll about whose contract this is. While Joe tends to the wounded priest, Max and Lovedoll continue their shootout, with both bringing down some of Max's remaining men. The explosion set off a fire, and as Lovedoll fights one of Max's soldiers, Max throws another grenade, causing scaffolding to collapse and trap Lovedoll. Max searches the church for Joe and ends up killing his last man, who was too injured to continue. Joe surprises Max, but they find themselves in a standoff, only for Joe to realize he's out of bullets. Just as Max smugly declares his victory, Maze shoots him in the head, ending the fight. Meanwhile, Antoinette prepares to flee the country, but Zvi shows up, revealing that she broke the assassin code just like her father did. Without hesitation, Zvi shoots her in the head. Sometime later, Joe and Maze finally have a proper wedding with the now-recovered priest and their friends in attendance. Joe is ready to settle into retired life, but Maze reminds him that raising a child is expensive and suggests he might need to take on a few more jobs. What do you all think about this movie? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content.